I wanted to talk a little bit about the API costs. Okay, the costing again, the structures can be a little different, but something I wanted to mention because you might be wondering that for open source models, what is the cost? When I was using Olama, when I was using the DeepSeek model, I was just downloading it locally. There was no costing there, right? So just for using the model, there is no costing. But the biggest costing is in the infrastructure. Because remember, you're hosting it on premises. It is your infrastructure, it is your servers. You have to procure hardware, GPU, CPU, RAM, memory, processing, have an administrator, have a network person on standby. You have to manage your entire infrastructure. And there is a huge amount of costing involved. And don't forget cooling. It's a big thing, okay? If you're having all the compute, you need to have cooling, you need to have a very, very robust infrastructure, and that's a cost. So although the model is free, but hosting that model on your servers comes with a huge cost. Please keep that in mind. Sometimes we think that okay, it is free, so it's great, but no, it's not. It's there's a huge cost you're paying for it. And if you're not willing to invest in a good infrastructure, remember there will be latency. Now, what do I mean by latency? Latency means that if I mean this one is a very basic model, right? 1.1 GB. It's a simple one, very simple model. That's why when I ask a question, I'm getting instant responses. But that will not always be the case. That will not always be the case. I will not always have something which is, giving such quick responses. The latency will not be this small all the time, right? This low all the time. So if I'm using a very powerful model, if I instead download the 30 GB one, it will take a longer time. Sometimes I have to wait for a minute to get a response. I ask a question, wait 1 minute, get a response. These are real considerations that you need to keep in mind, right? So if your infrastructure or your upfront investment is not good, although the model usage is free, but the responses will be slow. So compared to that, if you look at the top paid providers, when I talk about paid providers, I'm talking about Chat GPT, the GPT models, Anthropic's Cloud models, Google's Gemini models. They don't charge you separately for infrastructure. Unlike cloud services where you can set up a virtual machine, pay hourly. There's an hourly cost that you pay, for VM, irrespective of whether you use it. If you create a virtual machine, you have to pay for it. Whether you use it, whether you don't use it, there's a fixed hourly cost you have to pay, right? But very interestingly, for these language models, the cloud services and also the respective providers like OpenAI, Anthropic, they only charge you based on usage per 1,000 tokens. Generally, there can be other structures also, but generally the costing that we see is per 1,000 tokens. This is the indicative chart that I've given you. You can see that inside Azure, uh, the advanced reasoning models, let's say GPT-4 and all, the input token cost is separate, the output token cost is separate. Now, what do I mean by that? What is input and what is output? Input means what is the query that you're asking? What is the question that you're asking? Remember the demo that I showed you, user input, user message, system message, you remember? So input is the user message. It is a user message. Whatever you're typing in the prompt, we go to Chat GPT, we type something. That's the input that we are providing. And remember, if you provide a bigger input, it takes more time to process. It takes more compute and it's more expensive to process. So the company charges you based on the number of tokens. Very important. Input token is charged. And based on that, whatever output is generated, that is also charged. So, so both these things you need to keep in mind. So the benefit is that yes, you're not paying for the infrastructure. You're not paying for the hosting, nothing. The infrastructure is for free. You're only charge based on the usage. If you're using the infrastructure, then this language model is charging you. So and then you need to evaluate. You need to now, from a project perspective, evaluate what works for you. Evaluate with respect to the costing part. Evaluate with respect to the privacy part. Other things that we talked about. Is open source okay with you? Do you absolutely need a closed source model? Can you absolutely not afford data to leave your own premises? If you can afford that, are you okay with Azure? Because a lot of enterprise customers are already inside Azure, right? Same as your company. You are already inside Azure. So You're not sending your data to OpenAI, mind you, but you're only sending your data to Azure. The models are hosted inside Azure. The first demo that I showed you, I used the OpenAI developer platform. I was using OpenAI APIs directly. So there we are making calls directly to OpenAI. But remember, the same GPT models are also hosted inside Azure. So instead of directly calling the OpenAI APIs, I can instead call the Azure APIs, right? I'll come to the detailed demo for this in a minute. But before that, just to make sure everybody kind of understands what I'm talking about, we can see a small demonstration of this, how it looks like. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about this in detail later on. But you can see this is how the interface will look like. All of you remember from the OpenAI demo what I showed you a while back, where we were able to access the model directly, and you can see this is the same way we can do it here, right? So this is a GPT-4 Omni. I have the same kind of interface, very similar, right? Very similar to what I was using in OpenAI. And mind you, this is only there in Azure because OpenAI has exclusive partnership with Azure to host their models. This is not available in AWS or something, right? I can have all the deployments here. I can give a system message. You are an AI assistant that uh, analyzes analyzes the sentiment as positive or negative based on user reviews. See how I'm doing this? I can go and save it now, apply changes. This is my system message, and I can give the user message. The food was horrible, the same way I was doing before, right? And the objective, the idea is the same. The only difference is that here, what will happen is that and you will see the code. Look at the view code. The only difference is when you make the API call, you are not calling OpenAI, you're calling Azure OpenAI. And sometimes, and obviously in a big way, I see a lot of customers who are already in the Azure infrastructure. They are comfortable using this. They're comfortable using this. Okay, so although you're still sending your data over the network, you're still calling the Azure OpenAI API. See, the thing is very similar. Only difference is instead of directly giving OpenAI, you're saying from OpenAI import Azure OpenAI. The other one we were saying from OpenAI import OpenAI. The OpenAI package has to be installed, and then this is simple. Give the endpoint URL, give the API key, give the version name, and see the template is the same. The template is exactly the same. The chat prompt template is exactly the same. System message, user message, assistant response. Very similar, exactly. Okay, but yeah, the best part is that we are a little bit secure. We feel a little bit safer because now we are we are relying on the security and safety of Azure. Nothing leaves your Azure environment. Remember, these models are hosted inside Azure. So when I go to my deployment section, you will also do a demo. You will also shortly, all of you will do a demo. You can see my GPT-4 Omni is present inside Azure, is hosted inside Azure. So I'm not going outside Azure. Okay. Yeah, but you need to be mindful of this part, please. Okay, that there is a costing for the input tokens and there is a costing for the output tokens per 1,000 tokens cost. That is the general cost that we are incurring. And this is also very helpful to calculate the overall costing for your project. From a project management perspective, when you're planning the overall project cost, this is also very important. You need to maybe estimate to some extent your users, the kind of users you have, what kind of questions they will be asking, right? So you need to estimate the costing to some extent according to that. So this is just one other aspect I wanted to clarify. So the costing will need to be estimated with respect to that. Okay, because you need to limit. Otherwise, imagine that you're building a chatbot in your organization. If you do not limit the user inputs, if you allow users to ask all sorts of questions, then some users can write very basic, very long queries, right? But if your users are asking very long queries, then what will happen? Excuse me. If your users are asking very long queries, then your input cost will go up drastically. Okay, if your users are asking very long queries, then your input costs will go up drastically. That is one issue that will happen. Your input costs will drastically go up. So a very common method that is used is we go and we instead uh, give limits. Something like you will go and create a kind of a limit. You will say that, okay, uh, you can enter a maximum of something like, you can enter a maximum of 100 characters, something like that. Maximum 100 characters you can enter. You can limit your inputs. People will be restricted from entering a very very big kind of an input. So these are some of the things that you can do. And the output part we can also limit. How do we limit the output part? The output part we usually limit with respect to the prompt, right? So we can go and write a more detailed prompt, and we will look at some of those methods later. And usually this will be a part of the system message. We'll say, okay, the maximum the maximum output should be 50 words, something like that. But there are a lot of ways you can parameterize it. You can either write it like this directly, you can put it as part of the system message, or you can also have some other model parameters, something like this, where you can say maximum response is 500 tokens, something like that. You can control some of these kinds of parameters, right? But I hope everyone's getting the idea that this part is usually hidden. This is something that as developers, as people who are developing the application, we can see. But this part is usually hidden. When you're using the interface, when you're looking at the complete application, this is the only thing that we see. No, this is what we see in ChatGPT. But remember, to make this work, this is needed. Somebody has to tell the bot what it's supposed to do. Somebody has to set the system parameters. And this is again going to be a big part of the conversation that we are getting into in the next phase of our session.